We hear very often that we are replaceable, that we are just a number. I completely disagree with that. I think each one of us has a unique DNA. We have a unique value to bring to the table, and we are irreplaceable.
Welcome to Culture Talents. Each episode, I sit down with leaders who choose to work differently by unlocking the full potential of their teams and by staying fully aligned with who they are. I am Florence Hardy, founder of Le Labo des Talents and your host. Initially in French, this podcast now includes voices from across the globe, exploring how leaders grow through their natural talents and how they can help others do the same. Welcome to our podcast, Culture Talent, where we explore how innate talents shape our success as leaders. Today, I am really, truly delighted to welcome Ariadne De Oliveira. Pardon my accent. Ariadne, you are a global leader with over 25 years of experience creating value for international brands in the FMCG area, broadly speaking, like Wella, Nestlé, Danone, and quite a few others. And you are known, and I know you for your transformation abilities, catalyst abilities. So thank you really for making time today to share with us your wisdom and some insights about your path. Hi, Ari.
Hi, Florence. Thank you so much for inviting me. Je suis ravie d'être là. Merci. Thank you.
Yeah, not only are you awesomely innovative, but also multilingual. May I say that you actually come from Brazil initially and have worked in many countries? Actually, would you like to start sharing with us
Yes.
a few bits and pieces about your track and the countries you've
Yes.
operated in?
So, as you said, I'm born in Brazil, born and raised. I went to my undergrad degree also there. I worked my first 15 years in multinationals in marketing until I came to France to do my MBA at INSEAD. And after that, I worked for 10 years in global roles, the first one being Danone and others. Then I went back to Brazil, was there for more 7 years, and came back now to Switzerland, where I have worked for Wella in also global positions. So it's quite international and rich in terms of learning experiences and, working with many
Yes.
cultures.
Yes, I'm sure we'll come back to that during our conversation. But I also know you for managing global teams. So not just the countries you live in, but actually people that are all over the world.
Yes.
One thing I'm curious about, and I'm sure our listeners will be curious about, what first drew you to marketing roles and brand related roles?
Yes. So later, when I found my strengths with the work we did together, it became clear that they were critical in the choice of profession and in the choice of what to do.
Okay, tell me more.
So not to get into the strengths already, but of course the innovation, ideation, key talent was critical. I was looking for a profession that would enable me to be creative and to be innovative and to drive change, to drive impact at a global scale. So that drove
Yeah.
my choice to go into business and
Mm-hmm.
my specific choice of working for multinationals and then pursuing an education at a top business school like INSEAD.
Okay. Keeping a little suspense on your actual talents before we really dive in. Could you share with us what aspects of your career so far have been really most fulfilling for you? What are key moments or key contexts in which you have found yourself really thriving?
I really love when I can see the impact of my work coming to life. So the blessing of being able to drive plans
Mm,
and be
mm,
there to see them coming to life and to enjoy the results of those plans, to be able to celebrate with the teams and to do that across many countries, like you say, launching innovation across, more than 100 countries often and in many categories, many industries. So it brings me great, fulfillment. And of course, growing myself as a leader and seeing the talent grow with me across the decades is also a big
mhm.
source of pleasure for me.
Okay, so no more suspense. Please tell us what are your top five strengths, if you
So,
could list them for
for
us.
sure. So, number one is strategic. The
Okay.
number two is ideation.
Mm-hmm.
Number three, achiever.
Mm-hmm.
Number four, activator.
Oh,
Number five, learner.
wonderful. Now, in this top five, do you have a favorite or an anchor talent that you really, cherish so much?
Yes, definitely strategic and ideation are the two ones that I think define me.
Okay. Tell us more. What is maybe an accomplishment or a real life situation where you could really see your strategic? So, strategic, let me share a few words. It's about seeing the road from A to B or A to C or A to wherever you're going. How are we going to do it efficiently? What is the best route? Then, ideation, you will tell us, but it's about out of the box thinking.
Yes. I really believe the talents come to life in our personal and professional life. So I say that because I always dreamt of, again, having an international career. And I think the approach of thinking about it strategically
Hmm.
is not only to be able to see the path, but to see the path in the long term, right? So in a journey of 5, 10, 15 years. So what do you need to do now to be able to see the consequences of that in 5, 10 years? It's not so easy to do. We all know this is important, but it's quite hard. Of course, things change nowadays, especially, right? We will talk about
Hmm.
AI soon enough. The world is changing, but even more important, right? To have a very specific plan driven by our passion, by our drive that will keep us on track. So this drove my decision to, study my MBA abroad, but also at work. What are the segments, the categories we need to enter, and why, and when, and how? And then we hyper focus on those, as we call battles, because if we try to do everything, we then don't put enough energy and effort, and of course investments, and then our chance to win really diminishes. So I believe success is a consequence of doing the right thinking at the right time of where to play, where should I play. This is really critical.
And how do you manage to see so far? I mean, when you're saying 10 years, 15 years even, what nurtures your vision?
I'm very curious. I
Yeah.
mean, we will talk later about learner, but I'm very curious about
Yeah.
trends not only that are emerging, but what are the human behaviors of consumers, of customers, but even of employees, right, of talent in the company that can inform our thinking? So I'll give a simple example. We know minimalism is a trend, right? We all want to simplify our lives and our choices. So then it's not a surprise that brands and products that offer multi benefits and
Mm.
almost save your time, they are extremely successful. So we see
Hmm.
this immense success, right, of AI tools. Of course, they save us time. And who doesn't want that? So if we look, there's always a red thread that explains, why things that succeed succeed. And then, of course, we need to make sure everything we do delivers on those red
Mm.
threads. And then we
Yeah.
will win, and it will not be by chance. But equally knowing what not to do.
Ah, okay. Okay, how does that materialize? The what not to do?
What segments and categories are declining?
Hmm.
Why they are declining for sure. But the fact is, if they are already declining, right, it's much harder. I speak as a marketeer, but that's the strategy as well, to revert, right, a declining trend than to surf, right, a very strong
Mm.
wave. So this
Mm.
very deep awareness of the power of the ecosystem, of the competitive forces that are at play, bigger forces, bigger than the company, bigger than the country, right? Bigger forces that are very difficult to fight against. So we need to recognize those forces like the wind and go in favor of the wind. And then
Mm.
the
Mm.
products or the segments that are against the trend, we simply stop investing and pretend they don't exist or
Yeah.
discontinue them. That would be very productive.
Ari, listening to you, I'm also drawn to thinking of a couple of talents that are slightly below your top five again, but your command and significance really show up, I guess, in that decision making. But also tell us, I mean, these talents are driven for to create impact. So how does that show up and benefit you?
So again, after we made the analysis of where to play, right? So where should we place our bets? Then I do believe we need to move intentionally with
Mm,
intentionality,
mm,
and speed matters. So the
mm,
decisiveness angle to me is great because once we make a decision, we move on, right? And we then gain speed because
mm,
we have focus. But it's
mm,
equally important to give clarity to the team of what will not be the focus, because then we stop wasting resources. By resources, I mean time, people, money on the
mm,
battles that are lost. By
mm,
definition, is not because of anything else, is because of the
mm.
setting they exist. So we make an intentional choice, we communicate the reasons for that choice. I believe this
Yep.
is really critical to drive engagement and, of course, to build capability as well, because some people say you don't teach, like you're born with strategic.
Mm,
I think
mm.
that's questionable. I think
Okay.
there are definitely frameworks. In the end, I would love to give suggestions of a book that I love. So I think we can learn how to think more strategically.
Sure.
One thing is if we like or not like, but we definitely can learn frameworks and train ourselves. But critically, it's important to take a direction and stick to it. So to be
Yeah.
decisive and not change, because the strategy, as I always say, if it's changing every year, something is wrong.
Okay. All right. So the sort of defined plan and vision and the ability and the boldness to move forward, communicate to the teams, etc.
Align all the stakeholders. I believe it's important to touch on the point of the ability to execute from an organization depends on the pre-alignment, right? The consensus of all the stakeholders. So that's important as well to drive the excellence in execution later.
Okay. So this is often a real challenge to be able to align everybody, make sure that, decision is ripe and communicated. What are your tips in that area? How do you create that?
So I'm really a fan of data-based decision making. So I
Mm,
believe when we center ourselves in the consumer truth, in the customer truth, in the reality of the
mm,
markets,
mm,
changing reality of the markets, it's simpler to have an informed discussion, right? And having said that, it's always pros and cons, no? There's always compromise. So there's never a very clear path that it's unquestionable. But the ability to make decisions with imperfect information is also important, as
mm,
long as all the stakeholders have transparent, access to the data that was used, right, to feed into the
mm,
decision making. I think that's really important. Otherwise, we have the impression that strategy is done on top of the ivory tower in an
mm.
isolated manner, and that's the way to disengage the teams.
Okay, so that brings me another question that I hadn't planned for, but how do you balance big picture and visioning, thinking and practical delivery, practical execution?
I'm a fan of co-creation. By that I mean collaborating with, the key stakeholders in the markets, in the key geographies, not all markets, but normally the top 5 markets, sometimes top 10 markets, that will really make the results and drive the impact in the end, right? So being aware of the reality of those markets, again, the forces, right, that shape those markets and finding the red thread. If we co-create together, the plans will be stronger. Of course,
Yeah.
also after we launch, we normally launch in 1, 2 markets first, to be really agile in the sharing of best practices and
Mm-hmm.
course correcting quickly if
Mm-hmm.
needed. And,
Mm-hmm.
and for that, it's important to keep the ego out of the door, because
Mm.
plans change and it's fine. I think what matters is how fast we adjust, course correct, without wasting too much time blaming and finding who to
Yeah.
blame. That's an
Yeah.
energy waster. So I would say keep the pulse, very active, always in dialogue with the markets. I would say concretely, monthly meetings with the
Mm.
key markets to keep on track of what's happening with the launch, because obviously there's a competitive response that happens after you launch. So you also need to see how the competition is reacting and then readjust the plans if needed. So speed and alignment are really critical for any plan to be executed with excellence and succeed not only in the first year, but after 5 years. Again, the long term thinking.
Okay, now talking about innovation, novelty, things that are new still, you mentioned earlier AI. And I believe this speaks to, of course, your area of expertise and of responsibility, also speaks to your talents. So, how have you embarked on AI, inverted commas, so far?
So 1.5 years ago, I enrolled in a course of AI because I felt the need, my learner strength guided me, to getting informed, education on the topic. But immediately, because I'm very practical and an activator, I immediately, 1 week after completion of the course, I challenged in a constructive way the team to implement, right? To implement the key learnings and work with agencies, partners to challenge them on how can they, embed AI into our daily tasks. And this is mostly about content creation, but also how do we film and photograph our models. So there are many concrete, let's say, consequences. And we have grown so much in this process. We have learned, we have also inspired other brands in the company, other teams, and including the local markets to also experiment. The key point here is that, first of all, the pace of change with AI is so intense that we learn by doing, right? So we have to be bold enough to try. Whenever the energy that is driving is fear, then we avoid the topic. But it's a force that it's impossible to avoid. So we need to make it our partner, to amplify, magnify our intelligence, our collective intelligence, because we all learn from each other, we share with each other. And then it becomes a passion for learning, and it's a virtual circle of sharing of lessons. And now, the team keeps on experimenting with AI. And even if you leave the organization, the legacy remains. And I'm really proud of that.
Yeah, I'd like to just highlight, obviously, we're not seeing, this is an audio podcast, but you were just kind of spiraling up with your hands to show the virtuous circle of learning as a team. All right. Tell us a little bit about all the multicultural across continents, across countries, across maybe brands even. How is that diversity a lever for you, a richness for you?
I really believe to have a culture of innovation that is excellent, we must have diversity in the teams, in the headquarters, in the global teams, but also in the local teams. I believe people from diverse backgrounds, and I'm not only talking ethnical background, but also beliefs, different professional tracks. So not only from the same industry, that's helpful as well. So a plural, a multi view of the world of marketing, it's really rich because then we link the dots. It's easier to link the dots between apparently unrelated topics or trends, but you link the dots more easily because you have had such a rich experience, across countries, across categories, and you can link the dots of those different experiences. You also learn by doing in a sense of losing any fear. You become bolder because of your experience in trying different things in different contexts and succeeding and eventually failing, but you learn from those experiences. So I believe we also become a living example that it's always constructive and productive to, experiment. And you learn from those different cultures. Definitely, we learn.
Are there any anecdotes that would come to your mind that you could share with us in terms of how diverse perspectives have, been either funny or created value?
Yes, I will give an example from hair color industry. So my position, my role was the Latin American, consumer beauty VP, vice president, and my mission was to accelerate and make innovation more relevant. And we saw the different hair colors the shades that were available.
Yeah.
And we didn't have the top 5 bestsellers in dark hair. And you cannot see
Mm.
me, but everybody knows I have very dark hair, just like majority of the population, no, not only in Latin
Yeah.
America but also in the Middle East, in
Mhm.
Japan, in Asia.
Asia. Mm.
So then you might say, well, it's obvious. Well, I know, but we didn't have it. So I then accelerated the development of that line that we call Midnight Collection. That was not surprisingly a great success, not only in the region I was responsible for, but also in the Middle East, also in Asia. So it went from being a regional project into a global project. And then it caught the attention of the global innovation teams. And in the end, it was one of the factors that made me then move to the headquarters. So it was a simple, if you think insight, but very universal. So not only relevant in the region I was responsible for, but across many regions. And it was
Yeah.
a huge, successful commercial initiative and innovation that then led to bigger scopes for me later in my career. So I believe sometimes what's in front of us that is very evident is overlooked. Sometimes we make things more complicated than what they have to be. I think there's power in simplicity, in being
And
humble, in looking around, asking sometimes questions that are too simple, but they are the most
mhm.
important questions to ask.
Yeah. I also am reminded listening to you as the way you kind of channel this sort of inside database of information in your field with your input, if I need to make a reference to talent, but even leaving that aside, how you are truly so knowledgeable in so many fields, the curious Ari.
The learner, again, because the learner is not only from books, again, everybody that knows me knows that I love books, but looking around us, the world around us. I love to observe what drives behavior,
Mm.
the action more than the narrative. And then I think we learn so much from that. We get inspired and it gives us ideas to do things differently.
Now let's switch to a different angle that I try to interview about also is the fact that we all at different times may face moments of more that are more challenging or some adversity. And would you be able to share with us maybe a challenging time in your path and specifically then how your talents maybe have helped you through this? How you've made them your kind of anchor resources in these moments that things are less easy?
I will be very transparent. So right now,
Appreciate it.
it's a moment where I am blessed to have the luxury of choosing, my path in terms of the future and in what company I would see myself working. And I'm putting to my advantage all the 5 strengths.
Oh,
By that
okay.
I mean,
We want to know more.
oh yes. By that I mean being strategic about what is the corporate culture that would best leverage my personal strengths, where would I thrive and why. So looking for a match between my personal values and the
Mm,
corporate
mm,
values. So very strategic about it because of course then I have a higher chance of success in the midterm and in the long term. It's what we
mm,
all want, right? Ideation in terms of thinking creatively on where am I living? Am I only in the country where I am now? Or am I
mhm,
thinking midterm, long term, city that probably will enable me to have more opportunities in the future? So being
mm,
creative about location, the achiever angle in terms of being very intentional about the leads I'm reaching out to, the connections I am making, and what am I coming across in each one of those interactions. So very intentional there. Activator in terms of taking the first step. Everybody knows that that's not easy because it's a very competitive world and we need to be very humble, but at the same time, very self confident that we have a unique value to bring to the table and we are irreplaceable. We hear
mm,
very often, Florence, that we are replaceable, that we are just
mm.
a number. I completely disagree with that. I think each one of us has a unique DNA,
Yeah.
and again goes back to diversity. And it shows in the passion with which we lead, we come across, the commitment we have to the business. If we believe we are just a number, then why would anybody hire us? I really think we can make a difference. It's our
Yeah.
duty to make a difference. So I believe that's what's giving me energy now to activate, to be the catalyzer and to have a self-drive
Yeah.
that even though when we don't know what the future will bring, we still have energy, to prepare the best way we can, to show up our best self and to have hope in the future.
Yeah.
Hope is a
Yeah.
word that is not often used in the business context, but to me, it's really important. We need to believe in a better future, that we will, find the best path and the best path will find us. Learner, of course, because when we have the luxury of time, we then can honestly look at our gaps. I know the strengths focuses
Yeah.
on what we have that is natural in us, but equally sometimes, hard skills or soft skills that we want to improve on, it's the time to
Yeah.
invest, no? So I'm doing courses on sustainability. I'm doing courses on olfactory language. I'm doing courses on
So
many
you are
things. Yes.
learning in
Yeah.
capital letters.
Yes, because I mean, you know why? Because the more we learn, the more the brain is open to new ideas. And I think it makes us really more creative.
Yeah, and I could definitely hear that your activator is definitely about taking the first step, not being afraid of taking the initiative and being proactive about whatever it is. Thank you for this. Now, I'd like us to reflect a little bit maybe on your achiever talent, but with such a drive that I've witnessed for getting things done, achieving impact, achieving results, but also achieving impact, achieving growth, etc. How do you handle situations where maybe progress is slower than what you would like, whether currently or, in your roles as a leader? What has been the insights in that area?
Yes. So here it's is a challenge because it also links to managing conflict,
Mm.
understanding what are the hampers, what are the blockers that are slowing us down collectively. Again, I'm against blaming. Collectively, what can we identify that is slowing us down? And then collectively, finding solutions to remove those obstacles. And it's not always easy, but I'm a great believer that the less the number of priorities we have, right? I believe it's maximum three. If it's more than three, is not proper
Mm.
prioritization. So
Mm.
if we have three priorities, it's easier for us to gain speed, right? Sometimes I say the company is its own enemy because it sets too many priorities, and then the speed will get lower, by definition, because you have too many priorities. So I guess the company has to be honest in a sense of, are we setting ourselves
Up for
up
success.
for success
Uh,
by or not? And then if not, to course correct. Again, ego at the door. Are we trying to digest too much?
yeah.
And then in the process, of course, there's a risk of burnout of the team members because we really cannot achieve that much and we cannot even support that much in market in
Mm.
terms of
Mm.
investment patterns. So I think it's
Mm.
really a critical point on looking inside and seeing what are
Mm.
the potential sources of a
Mm.
slower, pace. Often the problem is with us, is not outside.
With the outside.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, reflecting on your five strengths, maybe I was wondering, would there be tips that you might want to share from your wisdom and your experience with to younger leaders that, would share similar traits as you?
Yes. For the younger leaders that share, let's say, the learner
Mm.
strength, find through that curiosity what really drives them, what they love. And I know there's a school of thought that says passion is not important. Well, you obviously know that for me is
Yeah, we've
essential.
heard
Is
this.
it? I know, but I think when you find something that you really love doing, that love will give you energy to go through the hardship because there will be hardship. In my journey, I have been through a lot of hardship and I am going through it now. What gives me energy is the love for what I do. I think that also cascades across the organization. And it's a catalyzer. Again, I think the activator is very linked to energy and the energy you convey, right? When people see how much you are involved and committed and engaged, it gives them inspiration to follow you. So I guess leadership is a lot about that, in my view, is to being a role model. So for the younger generations, sometimes people make choices that are, quote, pragmatic, but then they don't have that source of energy to tap from because they're doing something just because, let's say, it looks good on the CV, but it's not necessarily what they have a passion
Yeah.
for. Now, provocation, now with AI, there's a lot of talk about the future of work and what will the professions look like. So I think it's a great opportunity, I see positively, for people to challenge their preconceived notions, of what is a lucrative, a profitable profession,
Endeavor. Yeah.
endeavor, and also the role of entrepreneurship, the role of corporate jobs, the role of partnerships. I think it's an open field now, and we should benefit from that and really go after our passion, because in times of hardship, that for sure will come, that's where we tap and get
Yeah.
strength from.
And I know because when we prepared this conversation, you shared with me, you're also using this time to actually use your a little more availability to mentor women,
Yes.
to mentor leaders. So what is the way you approach this and what do you share with them?
So this
So we
is
cannot pretend we are your mentees.
So this is a program called Good Latinas for Good. It's specific for Latin American women, particularly the ones that dream about working in Europe or in the United States. And I'm really proud of this initiative. I wasn't the founder, but I have 5 women that I am a mentor of.
Wow.
Yes. And it gives me so much joy because I see the progress. And it's mostly about concrete tips in terms of driving their relational capital. So the power of influence and driving your agenda, let's say, to get change versus only thinking that outperforming and, being a high achiever is enough. I mean, clearly it's not enough. It's kind of table stakes. So this
Yeah.
is not that intuitive, especially when you're very young and you're used to, having high achievements at school, academic life, and then you go into work. It's really not what is not sufficient. So that's a big aha moment, right, for them. But I would like to say also what drove me to do that. We talk about the importance of diversity. We talk about the role we play, but we need to think again long term and the future generations. And what are we doing now to inspire and help concretely the future diversity pool, right? Because in 15 years, I probably will not be working anymore. But then what is the legacy I leave? So that's what I thought. What am I concretely doing today to help those women? Because if I'm doing nothing, then we are talking about an empty speech. So I invite everybody that is listening to this podcast to pick someone in their organization or in their circle, young,
Surroundings. Yeah.
from 20 to 25, maybe, that is a member of a minority, either because of socioeconomical class or because of ethnicity, for any reason, and to help this person, right? Pro bono, of course. I think it's a great impact we can have versus only talking about how important diversity is. And I'm learning a lot from them.
Yeah, so that was exactly my question. Oftentimes, the mentor-mentee relationship is one that goes two ways. So what are you learning?
First of all, in this moment I am facing right now, the way they see my track record and my career is very inspirational to me. I then get energy from that to drive further, to go higher. Because sometimes I hear self-limiting beliefs, but also from people in my circle, you went too far, you don't need to grow further. And those ladies between 20 and 35 years old tell me, oh no, please, you represent us. You represent
Continue.
us.
Yeah.
And we are really proud to see your achievements. You cannot imagine the amount of energy this gives me. And then I can face anything because I know I am not alone. All these women and men cheer for my success. And it's really fills me with pride. So we are bigger than ourselves. That's what I want to say.
Yes. Well, in fact, you said we're bigger than ourselves. And you also said something that I'd like to emphasize. We each bring something unique that if we don't bring it is lost.
Yes. It is lost because there's no record of that. Unfortunately, in companies, all of them, There's a lot of record, of course, on the financial achievements and what drove those successes. There's not enough record of what are the behaviors, the leadership behaviors that were the root cause of those successes. So we talk a lot about a playbook of success, but we don't talk about a playbook of leadership. So it's what we can talk, about those topics with these ladies, and they can see transparently, the glory, but also the falls. And what do you do when you fall, right?
Yeah, the real life in a way. With all of this, Ari, what about courage? What does it take to really go through this?
I really believe the more you try, it's like learning how to ride a bicycle. The more you try, the less afraid you are. So it's really a muscle that we have to exercise. And it's the same with creativity. The self-limiting belief that I like the status quo. I am comfortable in my area of expertise. I have been working in the same category for 25 years. I have no chance outside. It's not true. My invitation to everybody listening, again, nowadays with AI, we are valuable for our ability to link, to make connections and to bring added value. If everybody is reproducing the same mode in terms of a cookie cutter, then there's no differentiation. Again, as a marketeer, of course, differentiation is the name of the game. If there's no differentiation, there's no way to win. And there's no way to charge a premium, right? There's no way that consumers will recall or remember or even desire something that is more of the same, not unique. So I guess we all need to think about that, to have that in mind. Are we making ourselves obsolete by fear, just because we are afraid of trying something new? So, and there's no safety. Sometimes we have an illusion of safety, right? That staying in the same place is safe. Well, there's no safety. So what's safe is to believe in yourself and to know that whatever the world brings, you will be able to overcome. That's what I believe.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I love your perspective that brings together the clarity, the diversity of whether marketing, human, etc. This is all about being centered on what makes a difference, how we are different.
And that's true for any profession, right? It's not only true in the business world. I think we can apply that in any profession.
I know you are an avid learner. You told us about this, but I would say also reader. And I am sure you have one or maybe several readings you'd like to offer us before we conclude. So please inspire us.
So to make the point of choice, I will just recommend one book. It's called Winning the Right Game from Ron Abner, professor of strategy from 2021. And it's one of the best books, I believe, because it talks about, again, the competitive forces that are emerging, on the ecosystem. They throw us in new directions. We need to understand, what are those forces of the ever-changing ecosystem. And then we design to win, right? So we talk a lot in business about playbooks, but we don't often enough discuss that the playbooks are obsolete by definition because the ecosystem is changing. And we obsess about optimizing playbooks, but sometimes the questions are different. So you need different answers, So I think we need to take time, invest time collectively to check, has the ecosystem changed? And nowadays, with the pace of change, it changes too often. It changes, every 3 months, probably. So even the annual planning process that most companies operate on, we need to really challenge that. Of course, we have to be structured and we need to give, guidance, right, that survives time. But we need to have a level of flexibility to adjust for external environments. So that's one point. There's another phrase that I love, which is, we shouldn't optimize what shouldn't exist.
Oh, yeah. So, yeah, where are we putting our attention and what game are we playing?
Well, and let's be brave again to exit situations or product lines or markets where we should not be present. And then we get that energy to win somewhere else,
Yeah. So power of choice.
Power of choice.
Thank you so much. I'll make sure that this book is referenced in the show notes so that everybody can find it. And I will myself actually read it. So, Ari, I would like to thank you very, very much for sharing your insights and your experience so boldly, transparently, openly today. I certainly look forward to your next adventures and, of course, being in touch. Where can our listeners connect with you if they would like to continue the conversation, maybe get in touch?
So LinkedIn is my virtual home. So LinkedIn is where they can find me. I also recently have been more active on LinkedIn with, sharing my thoughts, sharing my learnings. Again, I believe in collective learning and exchange of ideas. So please feel free to reach out to me, Ari Oliveira, Ariadne, on LinkedIn, and I'll be happy to continue the conversation. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ari, so much. Thank you, everyone, for listening in today to this first episode in English. There is more to come, but we hope you enjoy it. And for the French speakers and French listeners, I will try to make a French edited transcript available as well. Thank you very much. See you soon on Culture Talent.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Merci.
Thank you for listening to Culture Talents. When we lead from our strengths, we open new ways to grow and to thrive together. At Le Labo des Talents, we help leaders and teams do just that. Want to learn more? Visit labodestalents.fr/en or find us on LinkedIn. Remember, lead with who you are.